I am an opinionated data scientist. I am steeped in Silicon Valley lore, so I think like a lot of technologists and data scientists here in Northern California. And my focus has always been my frustration with how little data is used in real estate. Real estate and commercial real estate are one of the largest industries in America. But has anyone in real estate ever tried to be like Amazon? Amazon's not an e-commerce company. They're a company that uses very large amounts of data to study people's behaviors and to make appropriate suggestions at the appropriate times. And so they're really a technology company and a data science company, and look at where that's gotten them. And when I look at real estate, I feel frustrated that people are not doing that enough. And then I realize it's because you really have to be steeped in Silicon Valley culture to kind of think that way, to think about everything as mathematical. And I know sometimes that makes us seem heartless because we're not thinking about tenants, we're thinking about mathematics. But actually, our communities are incredibly well run because we're using mathematics to improve customer satisfaction. So as you can imagine, I've had a successful technology career. I've had a successful technology exit. I retired for 3 months. Month one was great. Month two was okay. Month three was horrible. I realized the next time I retire, it's when they're carrying me out of the and to be buried. And I wanted something that was passionate about. And I had already been passionate about real estate for a decade before my tech career ended. And I felt like this was something that I wanted to do, but I wanted to bring a different spin to it. So one day I sat down and I wrote a vision for how my company and what I do would be looked at differently from others. So, and some of those have come to life because, for example, I'm called the mad scientist in multifamily because I'm out there, in 100 podcasts a year at a dozen conferences talking about the use of data analytics to improve investor returns. And when I say it that way, it doesn't seem sexy. So I tell people you can use data to become millionaires in real estate 10 times faster than other people that are investing in real estate. Now that sounds a little bit sexier, right? They're like, oh, data, right? That's pretty awesome. So, so you can use data to cheat in a legal way. And that's become my focus. And we now have, besides the 500 investors that have given us money for our $350 million portfolio, we have 50,000 investors using the data that we publish. So each year we publish data. And we publish data in lots of different areas: single family, multifamily, fourplexes, student housing. I think the one that's considered, to be the most powerful, that the most number of people are following, is that we publish a toolkit each year, and we update it every year, on how to figure out the best cities and neighborhoods in the US with a focus on tertiary markets that nobody knows about. You've never heard of these. You've never heard of Idaho Falls or Dalton, Georgia, or Durham, North Carolina. Places like this that make the most amount of money because they have extraordinary growth rates. New Braunfels, Texas, right? A city that's 33 miles away from Austin. Everyone, Austin, Austin, Austin all the time. But did you know that there was a city growing 3 times faster than Austin, 32 miles away? And it's growing because of Austin, right? I'm obsessed with figuring out those cities because that's where the real money is, because everyone's overpaying in Austin. Everyone's overpaying in San Antonio. But what if there was a city in between the two of them that nobody even knew how to spell, let alone invest in? That's where the money is to be made. And that's what I've become obsessed with. And that's the kind of data that we publish each year. And we talk about different cities and different parts of different cities, because there are no great cities to invest in real estate. This is a myth. There's only a quarter of each city that's great to invest in. And we're trying to figure out which quarter. And so that's really my story. I'm happy to tell you kind of how I got to this point from 2003 when I started, but that in brief is what I'm all about. The biggest aha moments that I've had came in 2008 when I started doing single family. When I was doing new construction, what I learned there was this. Most new construction in the US is done in a very poor way. You basically have an architect who comes in and tells you what to do, and then you have a builder that comes in and tells you what to do. But the truth is, you don't have to listen to either one of these people. They just act as if everything that they're saying is the city law. So what I learned, the biggest things that I learned was I would basically, instead of listening to them and them saying, we will spend $100,000 on air conditioning, I would go back to them and say, I want to spend $35,000 on air conditioning. How can you make it work? And often they couldn't make it work for 35,000, but the question was so awful and absurd that they would feel pushed, and they would come back and say, well, I have this $63,000 option. Well, why didn't you give me this option up front? Well, I didn't know if you wanted it.
Yeah.
Like what kind of customer would not want to know about a $63,000 option if it existed? And the truth is that option involved them jumping through more hoops, and so they wouldn't present it. So what I learned is you can actually easily save a third of the money in new construction if you basically play your own tune instead of listening to what these civil engineers, architects, and builders are saying. Right. So that was a very big aha moment for me. And I apply it now because today, $200 million of my portfolio is new construction. So after these properties settled down in 2010, I became obsessed with something new. I became obsessed with figuring out the best cities in America to invest in at any given point of time. This last part is different because Madeira was clearly the best city to invest in 2009. Well, it's not today. Each year, it's a different city, right? Every 6 months, it's a different city. So I became obsessed with a new trend, which is how do I continuously know the best markets in America to invest in, right? And that led me to mining. I went back to the Ukrainian hacker. We started to mine not just the Zillow website, but we started to mine the Bureau of Labor Statistics. We started to mine a whole bunch of websites that had data, Census Reporter, and we started aggregating the data. And what we did was we took these massive data sets for 3,300 cities, and we started playing what if scenarios. What if I look at cities that have this much population growth? What does that mean for my real estate profits? What if I look at cities that have schools like this? What if I look at cities that have, this much job growth? What if I look at cities that have lower crime? So we started playing what if scenarios, moving numbers in and out to build a very simple dashboard that gave investors an unfair advantage, right? And after a massive amount of playing back and forth, I found that there were 5 things that had the biggest impact. I'm sure that there are other things that have an impact, but the 5 things pretty much got you there 95% of the time. And they were job growth, home price growth, population growth, crime reduction, and income growth, right? So jobs, income, home price, population growth, and crime reduction. These 5 appeared to have the strongest correlation to profit. Because I was obsessed about, if I move this factor, does it move my profit up? What about this other factor? And then, and people are like, but you didn't throw schools in there. No, what I found was that these 5 factors accounted for schools.
They're proxy.
Right? They accounted for them. So when I threw schools in, I was still ending up with the same list of cities. So I took the schools back out because I wanted the simplest system. So now I was like, oh, this is working really well. I can figure out some of these amazing cities that we can invest in. So then I was like, but how do I give this away to people, right? I wanted to give it away. I mean, I'm a data scientist. We're obsessed with just giving data away to people, right? Data should not be charged for. So initially I was like, let me start a meetup group. So inside my technology business, we had big campuses, classrooms. I started a meetup. I became sort of well known in the Bay Area as the crazy, technologist guy who doesn't do real estate, but, has all these meetups and talks about all these cities, and people would show up 100 at a time. So I was enjoying that notoriety and building a database. I didn't know what to do with it because I was in tech full time. But then I was like, but I'm a technologist. We don't do meetups because meetups are 50 people at a time. How do I get to 50,000 people listening to me? So I went around asking people, what are these websites that I could host my education, my training, my content on? And eventually somebody says, don't bother with anything else. Just go to udemy.com.
Yeah.
So I was like, okay, I went to Udemy. I created a course. It was a video-driven course of me talking with PowerPoint, and it was pretty slick. I actually had a cutout on the right side of the screen, and I made a 100-minute course. And I'm like, if I can get to maybe 500 people a year, that's a lot better than meetups because it's doing it on its own. Well, if you go to udemy.com/realfocus today, it's the best reviewed course, the most popular real estate course on an incredible website. People take it from all over the world. I think 60% are Americans. And that changed things for me, because now I was giving something away to tens of thousands of people. And as you can imagine, those people started to follow me. So I started to build a website. I built a website called multifamilyu.com, because by that time I was obsessed with multifamily. I realized the benefits of multifamily over single family, the scale, the cost segregation. There's so many benefits that multifamily has that single family doesn't have. So I became obsessed with that, built a website, multifamilyU.com, started doing webinars there, and all these people started to follow me. And so, this was around the time when our company was ready to sell. So we sold it to a private equity firm. I tried retiring, that didn't work. So I was like, okay, I'm going to go into real estate full time. And because multifamily is something I was interested in, that's where I ended up. And I already had this big database of people that sort of liked what I was doing. So they followed me in and started investing. So I started investing in unknown cities like Dalton, Georgia, and Durham, North Carolina, and Idaho Falls, and St. George, Utah, right? And you're like, these don't show up in my list. And I'm like, yes, that's the point. And then I went back to my roots, and my roots were new construction, because I'd started there. And so today, 80% of our portfolio is new construction, about 20% is value add, right? So all this crime report reading business would take forever.
Yep.
So what I did was, I first figured out the rules of thumb and the metrics. Then I figured out websites that are free that I could apply those rules to, back test them a few hundred times, and then simply give it to people, say, go here, follow these 3 steps. It takes 60 seconds. And if it's above this level, then you're good, right?
Got it.
So that's how simple I needed to make it. So crime, I wasted a humongous amount of time trying to correlate crime with profits. Didn't work. What worked is a reduction in crime. So the delta where crime reduces at a certain rate was key, and a certain level of crime. So it had to be both together. So I found a website called city-data.com, which publishes this data for pretty much every city in the US, even zip codes.
Yeah.
And so it has a crime table, and you can scroll down, you can plug in your city, so you go to the homepage, plug in, Columbus, Ohio, or Sarasota, Florida. And then there's this nice crime table that comes up. Ignore the entire table, the rapes, the murders, the robberies, ignore that. Go to the last line, it's blue in color. That last line on the far right, the number has to be lower than 500 for you to invest in a city. Lower than 500. And in the entire line from left to right, crime should be declining continuously. What I found was continuous decline in crime leads to a continuous increase in prices. Right? And cap rates shrink. Cap rates are shrinking and crime is declining. And so you get a price increase and another price increase. And that's what I mean about authorized cheating.
Yeah.
Right? So you know that because you know what's happening with that city. And you'll notice that in the same state, you can have a state that's not doing well, like Ohio, no population growth. Right? And then you have places like Dalton, not Dalton, Dayton, Ohio, losing huge amounts of population. Then you have a place like Cincinnati, small population loss. Then you have, Cleveland, more population loss. Then you have Columbus, 25 straight years of population growth in the same state, right? And that's my point, that you have these places all over the US that are growing like weeds and nobody knows anything about them, right? And I wanted a system that didn't take more than 10 minutes. So just the example that I gave you for crime, the same exact examples apply for population growth. Because when people say invest in a city that has population growth, that is nonsense. That doesn't mean anything.
Yeah.
You have to have a certain amount of population growth before there's so many people in there that they're fighting over the real estate, and that's what drives up profit. So, a place that has 1% annualized population growth, it's not enough population growth for people to be fighting.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
You only want to go into cities where real estate is going crazy. I tried to do just multifamily value add, and I was a miserable failure.
Okay.
Because I spend 2 hours a day reading research reports. I am subscribed to every research newsletter known to man, right? So I pay for all of it, and I look at this. And clearly, lots of these services point out to the fact that while in general, large multifamily is one of the most advantaged, resilient and tax advantaged classes in the US, it's not always the best. And that was a horrible thing I came to because I was just doing multifamily after multifamily. But eventually I had to say publicly to people, it's not the best. In any given year, Multifamily was either number 2 or number 3 in the US. Number 1 would be something like self-storage or mobile home parks or industrial. Those are the ones that were rising faster than multifamily. They had a higher delta growth. And so I was like, why should I only do multifamily? Is someone holding a gun to my head? So I was like, I'm going to do self-storage. So I did that. Very profitable. I'm going to do industrial. And I did that. And just in case you're wondering why industrial is so hard, the answer is Amazon. We just had a pandemic, and e-commerce usage went up 5x in a certain verticals. And so where do you think all this stuff gets stored, right? If retail is going down, don't you think that that would mean that industrial would go up? They got to store this stuff somewhere. The logistics, right? So industrial use at this point in the US has gone completely ballistic, right? Never seen anything like it. Storage is very strong. Why? Well, companies are no longer signing office leases, but they have tens of millions of dollars worth of equipment in there, cubicles, computers. They have to keep them somewhere. They're not going to throw them out. So they're putting them in storage. And people are working from home, so their ability to store stuff at home has decreased. So guess what they're doing? They're putting them in storage. So bottom line is this. Those are examples that worked during the pandemic. 2 years from now, it'll be something different. I became agnostic to multifamily. So what I decided to do was I said, multifamily is going to be my base. It's going to be my foundation. But in any given year, I'm not going to do more than 50% of my projects in multifamily. I'm always going to go for the asset class that is the best in that year. And I've tried but failed to do other asset classes. I've tried to do senior housing. I've successfully done student housing. So I've tasted from many cups, with multifamily staying kind of my base throughout that process. But that ended this year. So starting this year, my base is no longer multifamily. It's a kind of multifamily. And you can ask me about that if you like.
Yeah.
Because you cannot really build large office buildings and hotels for the sub 30 million that tends to be popular amongst mid-tier investors. So if Jesse and his team are buying it, you're probably going to buy 10 to $30 million properties, and there's plenty of multifamily available. I can't say the same for hotels. I can't say the same. Offices, yes, but the kind of offices that you want to buy that cash flow, those are usually larger buildings, right? Yeah. So an office project is typically larger, which is why they've always been popular on the institutional side. But today, a survey just came out earlier today from Marcus and Millichap. And when the survey asked people, what do you want to buy, right? Right now, they want to buy multifamily, industrial, storage, self-storage. What do you want to sell? Retail, hotels, and office.
Yeah.
Right? So, I mean, that's where we stand today. And by the way, people still want to buy senior housing. Though senior housing has taken the biggest hit amongst all the verticals. It's not retail. Retail's taken a hit, but, they reopened.
Yep.
But senior housing over the last 11 months has continued to drop in occupancy and has dropped to the lowest level in its history as of this month. So you might think, well, they're coming back. Well, not yet. I don't know when they're going to come back. But people still want to buy senior housing because the long-term, the fact that America is getting older is something that people are still focused on. So that asset class is doing poorly, but people are still interested in it. My focus, though, has changed over time. And I think anybody who's in it for a while will see that. As you know, I'm obsessed with numbers. So I'm looking at everything in a very different way. I've got weird rose-tinted glasses. So my investors would come to me and say, I loved this project. We made 24% annualized. Thank you. I did nothing. You send me these incredible monthly reports with videos every month. That's awesome. I've never seen anybody else do that. But here's the problem, Neil. After 4 years, you sold it. And all of the depreciation that you gave me in those 4 years got recaptured. And on top of that, I had to pay capital gains taxes on the gain at the end. And I had to pay ordinary income on all the cash flow you gave me. I don't like doing that. And people are like, no. You're the mad scientist. Figure out a way where there's no taxes. And I'm like, that's a fool's errand, right? So but people kept saying it for over the years. And eventually I'm like, there must be an asset class that has no taxes. If there's a way to do it, I'm going to do it. So first I veered off to opportunity zones and things like that. I did some projects there. They were successful, but eventually I realized this is a very niche thing. I need something that is more widespread, but is tax-free. So eventually, after lots of research, I realized that if you do a certain thing, fourplexes are tax-free. And you might say, well, everything Neil is about to say applies to single family, and the answer is no. Only some things apply. So when you build a fourplex and you hold it for 30 years, you're getting the depreciation for 27 and a half years. It's not getting recaptured because you're not selling it, right? And on top of that, when you're building all this equity gain over 30 years, imagine how much equity you gain over 30 years. Imagine like 10 syndications, 3 years each, right? So you're building millions of dollars of equity and you're never paying any taxes on it. And when you die, the basis adjusts because the law says that, and your kids never pay any taxes on it. And unless they sell it, the massive millions of depreciation, well, nobody pays any taxes on that either. So on the ordinary income, you're not paying any taxes. On the equity, you're not paying any taxes. You just have to hold it forever. And people are like, I don't like holding it forever. I want to cash out. Well, who's stopping you from cashing out? By year 5 or 6, its equity has gone up to the point where you can refinance. It's a single family loan, right? Anybody can refinance it, right? There's 10 lenders within a mile's radius that will refinance it. Take all the money out, get to infinite returns, keep it forever, rinse, repeat. Yeah. And it sounds too easy, but that's what I found was the best. It completely got around the objections of people around taxation and depreciation recapture. So there was one huge problem though. I was like, so people are buying their own fourplexes. How am I going to make any money? Right? So it clearly is the best option. I built Excel spreadsheets that showed 10 syndications versus a fourplex hold, 5 syndications versus a fourplex hold, 3 syndications versus a fourplex hold. It beats the shit out of everything, right? Because they're not paying any taxes. So it always beats the crap out of everything else. Yeah. But then I was like, how do I make money in this? So I eventually figured out a model to do that. And that has become our new base. We'll still do multifamily. We'll still do multifamily development, value add. But that's become our new base. And the model that I figured out is I build those fourplexes for people and I sell it to them. Yeah. And it took me 3 years to figure out how to do that because it's much harder to do that than, let's say, just buying a fourplex that's in the marketplace. So that's the model we have right now. It's a true wealth building model. And I got to the point where I don't charge any profit. I just take fourplexes as my profit. I'm building a percentage of that generational wealth by taking all of my profit in fourplexes. So I'm, now going to end up with fourplexes in Idaho Falls, in New Braunfels, in Houston, in North Carolina, just wherever I'm building them, because there's 7 projects that we're building at different price points, different delivery dates. I mean, that's nirvana for me. So I'm not paying any taxes at all. Syndication, then individual investors. So we had to take our syndication model, which was tried and tested. We'd done it, 17 or 18 times, and then we merged it together with an individual investor model. So we did both because you still need the equity at some point. So it's a very interesting model that the way that we designed it, it absolutely doesn't work if you don't have 30,000 investors following you because it's a, very large amount. It's $1.5 million is the price of a fourplex. So people are putting down $450,000 to buy this thing. So you have to have both the $100,000 syndication investor and the rich dude, right? And you have to match them together at the same time. So it took us about 3 years to figure it out. But now that we figured it out, I've never had so much satisfaction with what I'm doing. I'm truly, truly building wealth for these people and giving them a predictable product. The other piece of it is, when I started building them, I was building small communities. Then I realized there was a big problem. The property managers were not scaled. They were single family property managers. Now I only build 100 units at a time. So it's, institutional property managers that are used to managing multifamily. They've got an on-site property manager. All of those benefits of large institutional multifamily, why we love it. But everybody owns their own fourplex and everybody controls their own destiny within that large institutional multifamily. Everyone needs to really research what generational wealth really means. The people, you've heard this before, that 90% of America's richest hold a very large amount of real estate. Those guys were not flipping. They weren't landlords. They were investors that bought real estate, held it for a long time, and refinanced it out every 5 or 6 years to build wealth. That model is not taught anywhere. I'm not sure why. I think it's because nobody benefits from it, so nobody teaches it, right? Only the end investor benefits from it. So my feedback to you is research it, Because if you don't, nobody will ever teach it to you, right? But once you understand what that model is, and once you take an Excel spreadsheet and sit in a corner for an hour and calculate the difference, I don't think you're going to do anything else in real estate. You're going to know why people have become billionaires in real estate. I mean, one of them ended up as our president. And it was generational wealth passed down from senior Trump to junior Trump, who built on it, right? I want you to really understand that idea, because in all of these decades of research, I've never come across anything more powerful, not just in real estate. I haven't found any other areas. Real estate, of course, is tax advantage, compared to other areas. And until our tax advantages go away, I cannot find anything else that's better. The gut feel is one of the biggest problems in your life. People learn something, it works for them, and then their gut feel tells them that because it worked once, it will happen again. So gut feel is a very evil and destructive force. People who say, I depend on my gut, are basically saying I'm too lazy to do research. I'd like to share a book that's not my favorite. So, I have favorites like everybody else, but I'd like to share the book that I think has the greatest impact to the lives of people that read it. And far and away, it's The Miracle Morning. Because while there's many better written books, for the 10 or 20% of people that read The Miracle Morning that it really has an impact on, it has an outsized impact, because The Miracle Morning gives you the gift of time to go find your favorite book, to go read your favorite book. So if you haven't read The Miracle Morning, try it. If you're 1 out of 10 people that it changes your life, I mean, it's just absolutely freaking astonishing.